This is 15 through 11. So the 15th place is Justified on FX. This is a series that is one of the very few shows I've seen that really captures the Southeast, rural Kentucky. Reminds me a lot of the rural Alabama part that I came from. And basically, it's just a great, starts out as a procedural television series and then kind of gets more serialized as it keeps going. Excellent villains. Boyd Crowder, Walton Goggins, another great performance from Walton Goggins is almost, in my opinion, more easy to root for than the hero, which you don't really think that in the very first episode, but he's so smart and charismatic and fun to watch. In a weird way, Raylan Givens, Timothy Oliphant's character, sort of a wet blanket. You almost want to watch the criminals of this world do their thing and take Raylan out of the series or whatever. But there's Margot Martindale in the second season as Mags Bennett, just excellent, wonderful. Sam Elliott joins the final season as a crime lord. It's really excellent. Just check it out. 14th best series of this century is Eastbound and Down. This is a show that I think, like some of the others on this list, grew into a cult following. After it was off the air, I watched it from the beginning, but this is another series that each season gets better, which is hard to do. Any show that does that is automatically in contention for this list because most shows lose steam. They get worse as they keep going. First season is good, but then the second season set in Mexico is a lot better. The third season, which goes to Myrtle Beach, and then the fourth season where he's quit the sports world and is basically a sports commentator. What I love about it is that each episode is different. They don't just want to run the same plays over and over again. They don't just keep characters in the same place. Each episode is almost a different location, which you don't see that in comedy, especially. Comedies, you are trapped in sort of the same settings over and over again. Eastbound and Down doesn't do that. He blows up the walls and Danny McBride goes everywhere, all over the country, all over North America. The 13th best series of this century is Brotherhood on Showtime. Some people may not have heard of this show because at the time I think it was dismissed as a Sopranos knockoff. That's not really fair and that's not really true, but it's loosely based on the Bolger family, where one brother was a crime lord, the other was in the state legislature in Massachusetts. This is set in Rhode Island. So it's two brothers. One is trying to become the Speaker of the House in the Rhode Island state legislature. The other is a criminal who disappeared years ago to avoid the FBI and also a mob hit by the local mobster who wanted to kill him. But then he comes back. He wants to take over the basically Irish mafia in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's really good. There's plot lines about illegal immigration in there. There's plot lines about union contracts. There's plot lines about a lot of stuff that's going on and happening right now, in addition to it being a solid crime series. Now, there's a couple plot holes that don't totally make sense. There's a character who snitches in the second season that is not even brought up in the third season. You'd think you'd be killed, but they just sort of abandon it. But I still think the characterizations, the rich characters, and especially the two main brothers, I think the tension between them and their performances, it's two non-American actors playing a very specific regional dialect, but somehow they make it work. Usually doesn't. If this was a Southern show, I'd probably hate that aspect about it, but I think they actually do pull it off and are the best ones for these parts. The ending is fantastic. It's one of the best series finales. Not the best. We'll get to some of the best later on, but one of the best that I've seen. I really loved it, and I think you will get into it if you give it a chance. The best series of this century is Nathan For You. Now, some people may take issue with this because they might say, well, you said sketch comedies were not included and every show had to be somewhat serialized. This one sort of is. If you really watch all four seasons, there is some serialization towards the end where Nathan, I don't want to spoil it, but something happens with this character that you may not have anticipated. But this is kind of a parody of Shark Tank and all these pro-business shows that you see on CNBC and where they try to help a small business. Nathan comes up with ideas to help struggling small businesses. Some of them are helpful. Some of them are genius. Some of them actually do work. And some of them are, it's a comedy show. It's supposed to be funny. But I think is a ruthless parody of capitalism in this century. Nathan himself, Nathan Fielder, he's like Sacha Baron Cohen to me. Like, I really love his style of comedy and almost better because I don't know if he's as cruel as Sacha Baron Cohen or whatever, but I think that if you love that type of humor, you'll definitely be into this. The 11th best show of this century, Mr. Robot, which is a show that is alternately fascinating and frustrating. It's excellent and frustrating at the same time. Some people really hated the second season, and it is the worst of the four seasons. but they gave up on it. And I think they prematurely did that. This show ultimately is excellent. There's some episodes I love and some that I don't. And that's part of the journey. You're sort of taking it with them. Not everything has to be totally perfect because there's so many things that do work. A parody of evil corporations and the Chinese government sometimes using people who think that they're liberal activists. They think that they're helping good things and the destruction of a bad system when in fact they're just ushering in an even worse system. And so I think that by showing the way that China, in this case, in real life, China and Russia sometimes can use people unwittingly for their own means. Tulsi Gabbard, AOC, Bernie Sanders, people like that, Donald Trump. I think they're showing what can happen. There's a pretty interesting theory that Trump in the series is put in place by one of the main bad guys, who's the Ministry of State Security for China, sort of their equivalent of CIA. And there's a lot of interesting theories in the show. The technique is also interesting because they use different sound than you hear in a lot of TV shows. Some people find the sound irritating. It's almost like there will be blood at a certain point. Cinematography that you don't see in a lot of TV shows. There's one in the final season where they're running downstairs and they do a wide tracking shot following them down a spiral staircase. And Rami Malek, of course, put him on the map deservedly. And I just feel like you really should check out this show. And even though your patience may be tried at certain points, stick with it, okay? It's alternately, admittedly frustrating, perhaps deliberately so, but the world that it presents, the relevancy that it has to actually what's happening in the world, I don't think you see that with a lot of TV shows, or any, most of the time.